Thanks for staying with Bernama TV. Here are this hour's top stories. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called on Hamas to lay down arms. And India downgrades diplomatic ties with Pakistan following a deadly attack on tourists in Kashmir. Now, later in our Point of View segment, we speak to Professor PHAR BENG, Professor of ASEAN Studies, on Malaysia's leadership in the Myanmar crisis. I'm Liz Ong. You're watching The World on Bernama TV. We begin Bernama World with this. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called on Hamas to lay down arms and hand the running of Gaza to his Palestinian Authority. This move is part of efforts to address international doubts regarding the authority's role at a critical moment for the region. Abbas was speaking at a leadership council where he is expected this week to name a successor amid pressure from Western and Arab powers concerned about the Palestinian Authority's ability to play a viable long-term role in peace efforts. Now, according to Saudi state news agency SPA, Saudi Arabia's defense minister, Prince Khalid bin Salman, arrived in Tehran earlier today for meetings with Iranian officials. The visit comes ahead of weekend talks between Iran and the United States on Tehran's nuclear program. While in the capital, Prince Khalid also met with Ali Akbar Ahmadian, Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The US and Iran held discussions in Oman last weekend, which both sides described as positive and constructive. A second round of talks is scheduled to take place in Rome this weekend. Moving on, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi held talks with his Iranian counterpart Syed Abbas Araghchi in Beijing yesterday. Wang, who also serves on the Communist Party of China's Political Bureau, stressed that Iran is China's comprehensive strategic partner in the Middle East. Amid a turbulent global landscape, he said China is ready to work closely with Iran to implement the consensus reached by their leaders and to jointly safeguard their shared interests while promoting regional and global peace and stability. Araghchi, for his part, said Iran places a great importance on its relationship with China. He called it a bilateral friendship strong and resilient against outside influence. He added that Iran will continue cooperating with China to oppose unilateralism and hegemonism and to uphold multilateralism. Now, moving on, India announced a raft of measures to downgrade its ties with Pakistan on Wednesday. This came a day after suspected militants killed 26 men at a tourist destination in Kashmir, marking the worst attack on civilians in the country in nearly 2 decades. Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said the cross-border linkages of the attack had been brought out at a special meeting of the Security Cabinet, after which it was decided to act against Pakistan. The main border crossing checkposts between the two countries will be closed with immediate effect, and Pakistani nationals will not be allowed to travel to India under special visas. Here's an update on the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in South Africa yesterday, where he is expected to meet international leaders as peace talks with Russia are being brokered by the US. Zelensky expects to step up his diplomatic outreach this week and said that he would meet South African President as well as the leaders of Spain, Poland and the Czech Republic. Since taking office in January, President Donald Trump has upended U.S. policy toward the war in Ukraine, pressing Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire while easing pressure on Russia. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said he thinks he has a deal with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to settle the war in Ukraine. Speaking at the White House, Trump also said he found it harder than expected to work under and with the Ukrainian leader. Other administration officials said earlier in the day that a deal remained elusive and that the US could walk away from peace talks in the absence of quick progress. Now, still on Donald Trump, this time it's about China. He told reporters that the US will have a fair deal with China after a source familiar with the matter said the White House is considering lowering tariffs. The source comments followed a Wall Street Journal report that the White House is considering cutting its tariffs on Chinese imports in a bid to de-escalate tensions. Trump spoke with reporters at the White House but didn't address the specifics of the Journal report. His remarks followed optimistic comments he made on Tuesday that a deal to lower tariff was possible. Now, in South Korea, its acting president Han Duck-soo said the government will do its best to find a win-win solution in the upcoming trade talks with the US. A South Korean delegation will meet US counterparts today for the opening round of trade talks. Cooperation on shipbuilding and energy is expected to be on the agenda. Shared defense costs may also be discussed as Seoul seeks lower tariffs. South Korea, which faces 25% US reciprocal tariffs, is among the first countries the Trump administration has initiated trade talks with. I'm off to a quick break. When I return, we'll be speaking with Professor PHAR BENG. He's a professor of ASEAN Studies from International Islamic University, Malaysia, and we'll be diving into Malaysia's leadership in the Myanmar crisis. That's coming up. Stay with us. You're watching Bernama World. Welcome back with me, Melissa Ong. Now, in the face of one of ASEAN's most pressing humanitarian and political challenges, Malaysia has emerged as a vocal and proactive leader on the Myanmar crisis. As the region grapples with instability, the question is, how is Malaysia shaping the dialogue and driving action on the global stage? Joining us virtually to share his insights is Professor PHAR BENG, Professor of ASEAN Studies at the Institute of Islamic Civilizations and Thought, International Islamic University of Malaysia. Prof, I'd like to begin with this. Considering the Myanmar junta's recent actions, how do you assess the effectiveness of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's engagement with both the junta and opposition groups in seeking a ceasefire extension? Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister has actually gone out of the way to engage the military junta, specifically General Min Aung Hlaing. But concurrently, he has also had one online session with the interim Prime Minister of the National Union Government of Myanmar, which is the one that actually was unseated or dethroned on February 1st, 2021 by the military junta. So in that sense, you can say that Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, has a twin-track approach in engaging both the junta that has certain semblance of power in Myanmar, but that having been said, we should all keep in mind that he's only capable of controlling up to about 35% of what is known as Myanmar right now. Otherwise, the whole country is filled with endemic violence. It is a civil war, made worse by the earthquake recently.
Now, critics argue that engaging with the junta could legitimize their regime. How does Datuk Sri Anwar's approach balance the need for humanitarian aid with the risk of political legitimization?
That's a good question, but regardless of what the critics might say, we have to keep in mind that the junta actually has a very good relationship with the Thai military. Now, if that can be considered a form of recognition or legitimization, that has occurred long before Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim actually set into Thailand last week. So the issue of legitimization just by physical contact alone, leading to the criticism of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, from the context of actual reality, people who are in the know, it doesn't occur at all. because the junta has had constant dialogue and contact with Thailand and even special envoy of Japan, Sasakawa Yohei.
Now, given ASEAN's previous challenges in addressing the Myanmar crisis, in what ways does Malaysia's current leadership signal a shift in the bloc's diplomatic strategy?
There isn't specifically a shift, because what the chair of ASEAN is trying to do is to make the Jakarta 5-point consensus more actionable. In other words, something that can be operationalized. And the first condition of the 5-point consensus is one where there must be a ceasefire all across the country. In lieu of that, at the very least, there must be ceasefire in those areas affected by the earthquakes in Myanmar a few weeks ago. So that's what Prime Minister Anwar is trying to achieve in order to ensure that the humanitarian aid coming from ASEAN and also from the rest of the world can actually reach the affected residents in Myanmar, regardless of their ethnicity, race, groups, and religion.
Now, Prof, I'd like to understand how might Malaysia's proactive stance influence other ASEAN member states' approaches to the Myanmar situation?
Well, for what it's worth, we have to understand, or the rest of the member states of ASEAN, in fact, the whole world must reconcile themselves to, is the fact that we are dealing with a very recalcitrant leader in the form of Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. He's not someone whom you can meet 1, 2, or 3 occasions and then finally trigger a behavioral pivot to being more reconciliatory. This is, for the lack of word, a very stout and stubborn leader in Myanmar. Now, does he still command the respect and the loyalty of his lieutenants and other underlings in the Tatmadaw, which is the Myanmar military? That is a big question. But insofar as what the external stakeholders can do, we are doing our best to ensure that the minimum humanitarian aid and assistance can actually reach the ground.
Right, and now from a geopolitical perspective, what implications does Malaysia's involvement have on its international standing, especially concerning human rights and also regional stability? Perhaps you can walk us through a little bit about this.
So within the context of the political geography of ASEAN, Myanmar actually exists on the extreme flank of Southeast Asian Regional Organization. And Myanmar also has a long border with China, amounting to about 1,002 kilometers. And it has a slightly longer border with Thailand, which again is a member state of ASEAN. So in terms of geopolitical repercussion, what ASEAN would like to do is to ensure that one of our member states, which is Myanmar, does not have internal civil strife or military violence that can actually cascade and trigger a massive exodus of people from one state to the other. As it is right now, one of the reasons why Prime Minister is proactive in engaging the issue is because there are more than 200,000 Rohingya in Myanmar, in Malaysia right now, and they take all kinds of risky methods to come to Malaysia, most of which illegal, and that can lead to all kinds of problems in this country.
Now, looking ahead, what measures should Malaysia and ASEAN prioritize to perhaps ensure sustained peace and also support for Myanmar's civilian population?
Well, not unlike the situation in Gaza, ceasefire is of extreme importance. Without ceasefire, nothing can be done, because Malaysian military actually has the best intention of going into Myanmar to even set up a field hospital to assist and to alleviate the sufferings of the victims of the Myanmar earthquake. But then when you do not have a ceasefire and the violence is perpetuating itself from all sides, then it's extremely complex and difficult for the Malaysian military and also relief agencies from other countries to actually find a toehold in the country to provide the necessary relief and aid. So ceasefire, once again, is extremely important, and it's not unlike what is needed in Gaza as well.
And do you see that this situation will improve in the coming months or years ahead?
I wish I can be as optimistic as the best optimists out there, but I don't think so. But that having been said, the essence of diplomacy is perpetual and constant engagement. And this is also what has been repeated by the Prime Minister himself. Engage, 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 and engage. So to the degree that that can be defined as a form of proactive diplomacy, then Malaysia has it, and ASEAN has rich reserves of it.
Well, thank you for your insights, Prof. We look forward to speaking with you again. That was Professor PHAR Kim Beng with his perspective on Malaysia's approach to the Myanmar crisis. I'm off to another quick break. We'll be back with more updates. This is The World on Bernama TV. Welcome back with me, Melissa Ong. According to Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, survey efforts are underway following a magnitude 6.2 earthquake that struck Istanbul yesterday. He assured the public there was no problematic situation reported in the immediate aftermath, despite it being one of the strongest quakes to hit the city of 16 million in recent years. While there were no reports of major damage, the tremor prompted evacuations across the city, which straddles both the European and ASEAN sides of the Bosphorus Strait. Still in Istanbul, residents were left rattled and unsure of what to do after a 6.2 magnitude earthquake was felt across the city just after noon yesterday. Streets were quickly filled as homes, belongings and even pets were left behind while people tried to check on loved ones and brace for aftershocks. Parks were filled and doorsteps occupied as residents stayed outside, particularly in central Istanbul. Some shops on the European side of the city were closed after the tremors were felt. From earthquake to wildfires, according to the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, on average about 1,500 wildfires damage or destroy 7,000 acres of New Jersey's forests each year. The Jones Road wildfire started Tuesday night near the state's Atlantic coast in the Greenwood Forest Wildlife Management Area near Lacey Ocean and Barnegat Townships in Ocean County. The wildfire could be the largest in New Jersey in 20 years. The cause of the fire remains under investigation, and there is no timeline for full containment as the fire is expected to continue to burn for several days until rain comes on Friday or Saturday. Moving on, thousands of protesters blocked the streets of La Paz demanding action to address Bolivia's economic crisis, with prices rising at their fastest pace in 2 decades due to fuel and dollar shortages. Miners denounced inflation in explosives, while a multi-sectoral march against poverty highlighted the fuel shortage affecting harvests. Mining Minister Alejandro Santos said talks with the National Federation of Mining Cooperatives were halted, with protesters demanding direct engagement with President Arce. Bolivia faces its worst economic crisis since the global financial downturn, with falling foreign reserves due to stalled energy production. The ruling MAS party is struggling to maintain economic stability, hurting Arce's popularity ahead of next year's elections. In other news, Guatemalan police have detained Luis Pacheco, the country's deputy energy minister and a former indigenous leader, on charges of terrorism and illicit association. Pacheco previously led Los 48 Cantons, an indigenous organization representing the Totonicapán people in western Guatemala. He was also a key figure in demonstrations supporting now President Bernardo Arevalo. Hector Chaclan, who had served observed the treasurer of the same indigenous group was also detained. Now, speaking at a press conference as police searched Pacheco's home, President Arevalo called the arrest a cruel blow against the people of Guatemala. Pacheco had backed Arevalo in demonstrations after prosecutors attempted to invalidate his 2023 election win. Now we turn to events in Vatican City. St. Peter's Basilica will remain open past midnight tonight as thousands of faithful continue lining up to pay their final respects to the late Pope Francis. The pontiff was moved to the Basilica on Wednesday morning, where he now lies in state for 3 days of public mourning. Pope Francis, remembered for his humility and deep commitment to the poor, passed away on Monday at the age of 88 following a stroke. The public viewing offers Catholics a moment to grieve, with many waiting hours to enter the basilica where his open casket rests before the main altar. Now, due to the overwhelming turnout, the Vatican has extended the basilica's opening hours to accommodate the crowds. The official mourning period is set to conclude at 7 p.m. on Friday, ahead of the funeral scheduled for Saturday. Meanwhile, cardinal meetings are underway to finalize preparations for the funeral and the election of a new pope. That's a wrap for this hour's broadcast. Before we let you go, catch the nation live at 3 p.m. as my colleague Jessie Chahal speaks to Dr. Muraltaran Munisami, Managing Director of National Cancer Society of Malaysia, and they'll be discussing financing innovations in healthcare. Don't forget to visit Bernama.com for all the latest. I'm Liz Ong. This is Bernama World.